Hey there, welcome to the Flute 360 podcast. I'm Dr. Heidi K. Begay, and I'm a flutist, educator, coach, and podcaster. My God-given mission is to serve you. I am passionate about guiding you, the modern-day flutist, to discover your unique voice on and off the stage. The goal of this podcast is to help you thrive, both as an artist and as a musicpreneur. Go ahead and grab some espresso, your favorite notepad, and let's get to it. Today's episode 227, part 1, is titled, How You Can Make Your Own Musical Opportunities with Serena Huang. Hey 360er, I have missed you so much during my recent break, and I thank you for your patience as I took time away from the podcast to wrap up the details of the Ultimate Music Business Summit. So if you have not heard me talk about UMBS, here I go. So the Ultimate Music Business Summit is a 3-day virtual event for you to either jumpstart your music business or for you to thrive to the next tier within your business for 2023. Our theme is Leap, and we want to see you thrive in 2023 and beyond. So whether you want to recruit more students into your flute studio, get more flute gigs, it doesn't matter. We have gathered the best of the best to talk about these topics and so much more in January 2023. So if you're interested to start getting those students, getting those gigs, getting those corporate sponsorships, then you want to grab your ticket at musicsummit.biz. That's musicsummit.biz. Now, to make things really easy peasy for you, I have thrown all the links down in the show notes below. And today's content and interview with the phenomenal Serena Huang comes at a perfect timing. Reason being is because not only is she a flutist, a teacher, a digital entrepreneur, but she is also UMBS's intern. She has been helping us gain corporate sponsorships, and not only that, but Serena and I are friends. I have gotten to know her really well through the internship, but not only that, through one of my classes that she took last year. So listen to today's content as Serena talks about her winding path through her flute journey in creating a database for the community, gaining corporate sponsorships for her podcast and database, and so much more. She is such a fine example of what it means to be a modern day flutist thriving in today's current climate. Take out that notepad, take out that pencil, jot down some notes, because she is phenomenal at laying down tips and tricks so you can start taking those nuggets and applying it to your own music journey. Enjoy! Hey, Serena.
Hello. Nice to see you.
Yeah, it's great to see you, as always. Thank you for meeting me a whole 2 hours early. I think that this works out really well, and bummer that UMBS and the meeting got canceled, but we're making the best of it.
Yeah, we were going to be on Zoom anyways, so.
Yeah. Oh, shoot. So how was Berlin? How was your weekend?
Oh my goodness, it was awesome. I love the city. I didn't really have that many expectations for it because I don't do like a lot of travel planning ahead of time, but it was just a wonderful weekend. I made a lot of friends. I made a friend like on the overnight train, which was super cool. And she happened to live there. And then she introduced me and my friend who was traveling with to all of her friends there. And then it was just like this awesome like sense of community for the weekend. So really, really beautiful like art scene and creativity in the city for sure.
Oh my goodness. I'm so happy for you. I have never experienced sleeping in a sleep car overnight. or
Mm.
a car through the train, right? I've never had that experience before.
Yeah, no, it was super cool. I mean, I didn't really know what to expect. It was just I booked it because it was, like, cheaper than an airplane, and I didn't really wanna, like, go through, like, airport security and all that stuff for a short trip, so I was like, "I'm just gonna try the train, see what happens," and it was overnight, and I was like, "I'll just sleep on the train." And it's kind of stressful because I didn't book, like, a seat. So, like, you have to, like, go through all the compartments, and, like, some people have their names written on there, and you just have to find a seat where, like, nobody's name is written. And so I ended up, like,
Oh,
sharing a spot with my new friend because we both didn't book seats and, like, it was just random. And so we were like, "All right, this it's, like, better that we're together and, like, we both don't really know what's going on." And so we were just like, "All right, you put your feet over here, I'll put mine there, and then we'll try our best." And then when we woke up the next day, it was like, "Oh, well, we should be friends."
what a fun memory. That is amazing. So even though like the car situation and not knowing to claim seats or whatever didn't really pan out probably the way you had anticipated, you made a new friend. So there's that.
Yeah. No, I always make a friend on, like, long public transport. Like, I've made friends on the bus before. I think it's just the way to go.
That doesn't surprise me because you have such a warm, kind spirit to yourself, Serena. And I am sure that anybody who comes across your path is just drawn to you like a moth to a flame. So that doesn't really surprise me at all.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, there's something about also, I think, just, like, going to the same place and being in the same space for an extended period of time, like, it gives you room to open up too. Because otherwise, like, if you're just sitting in a public space, like, you might not think to start talking to someone, but since you're kind of, like, stuck there and also there's, like, a natural conversation starter because 'cause you're both going from, like, one place to another, it's really interesting. I like that about traveling for sure.
Ooh, I love that. So, does that come natural to you? I mean, I am getting to know you better and I'm starting to understand your personality more in depth the more we work together. But the reason why I ask you that question is that natural? Does that come natural to you starting up conversations, starting up relationships? Because I know that that is one of the pain points that I hear through my podcast listeners is hey, I know, like, I see that person over there and I'm intrigued by them. Or I think, oh, wow, like, what they're doing is really cool, but I'm going to stay over here in my neat little bubble and not bother them, not, impose. And so I'm just going to stay over here. But I keep encouraging people, like, no, 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 like, go over and start up that conversation. So I'm just kind of curious, like, what's inside your head as you initiate that conversation and that relationship, because maybe something that you can offer can really shed some light on this topic for the 360 listener.
Yeah. I mean, I think that as I've had more of these like random encounters and cool situations happen, they have felt really organic and natural. But I think it didn't start as comfortable as it is now. Like there's been a lot of growth along the way. I think just, through the life experiences that I've had and like definitely pushing myself out of my comfort zone every once in a while, I've learned to also be open to these situations. So it is kind of a two-way street. Like I'm not always the one initiating. Like sometimes it's a stranger that wanted to talk to me. And then as long as I'm open about it, then that conversation gets started. Or I've learned over the years to be the initiator a little bit more. And I think there's like a sense of like if you just think about how it feels when somebody else reaches out to you and how you would like to be reached out to, like that's usually how I go off of if I should start talking to this person or like what I should start off saying, because I've had people reach out to me before and I know like what feels good, and usually I'm really open and welcome to these things because it's like somebody thought of me, someone thought I was cool, someone saw me on the train and thought that I was a trustworthy person to be stuck in a cabin with, you know what I mean?
I love it. No, hats off to you. Really kudos because I know that, like you said, even though maybe it does come natural to you, through your personality, you've also had to learn how to be open and receptive to that too. So it is a skill that I think we can hone. And I think it's valuable because from those interactions, piggybacking off of what you said earlier, from those interactions, these really unique relationships and opportunities can unfold. And that's where the magic happens.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's like a very I mean, it's applicable to music and to entrepreneurship as well, basically anything in life, because you're not gonna be stuck doing something that's uncomfortable forever. Like, something I talk to my flute students about is like, okay, find a position that is comfortable, because if you're doing something just to sound good on the flute, but it's unnatural or it's uncomfortable to you, you're always gonna revert back to how you were doing it before. And, like, so I think, like, we do have a set of natural strengths, and it's kind of our job to figure out what they are and like hone in on those and play to our strengths. Because same thing with like entrepreneurial tactics, like if a business strategy feels like really uncomfortable to you and awkward to do, then it's probably awkward for the other party as well when you execute it that way. So like it's a little balance of like, all right, what do like teachers and mentors and the people on the internet say is a good strategy or like a good way to play, and what I feel comfortable doing, and then kind of finding the the happy spot, you know?
Ooh, you just literally connected all the things in that answer. Teaching, playing, entrepreneurship, networking. You just, oh my goodness, you weave that together beautifully. And that's why I love talking with you because you have so many fantastic ideas and you articulate it so well. So, for the 360 listener right now who's listening to this, you're like, whoa, you and Serena just went way into a conversation you just started right off the bat. And we did because a little backstory, Serena and I share many different hats together in our really amazing relationship. And we are friends and we are colleagues. And she's an intern through UMBS. She's taken a class of mine. I learned from her. I feel like I'm her student in many, many ways. And she's gaining corporate sponsorships. She's a flutist. I could go on, but I want you to know as the listener, like the reason why we're just like going right into it is because that's our relationship. And we've known each other for the last 6 months. I'm getting to know her that much more. So, Serena, before we start talking about all of the fantastic things that you have your hands on right now through your podcast, your database, what you're doing in Paris, perhaps you sharing with the listener a little bit about yourself, just to give them a foundation, I think is a great place to start.
Sure. So my name is Serena. I'm 24, just turned 24, and I'm a flutist currently studying in Paris, getting my artist diploma. Before this, I was in Philadelphia at Temple University. I studied with Mimi Stillman. And even before that, I went to Juilliard Pre-College studying with Bart Feller. So very much a classically trained flutist. And in more recent years, I wanted to branch out into arts advocacy and a little bit more into the music business, music admin space.
That's amazing. I was checking out Mimi Stillman's episode that I did with 360, and you were too fast. I was typing real quick Mimi Stillman into my website, and the number didn't pop up yet because you were just so concise with your answer. I love it. But I got excited because, yes, your background is so rich. And when you said Mimi, I recall that fantastic conversation that I had with her. I don't know if you've listened to that episode yet, but I learned a lot from her. And what an amazing experience to get to study with her for, was it like 3 or 4 years?
3 years, yeah.
Yeah, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, no, she's an incredible human, and I've been super lucky. I was one of the first batch of students to go through her studio at Temple because my first year at Temple was also her first year teaching there. So it was an amazing experience to really connect with her and have such a small studio to begin with. I think there was 3 of us my first year, and kind of seeing, you know, new students come in and how she like has grown as a teacher as well. I mean, she had been teaching before Temple, but this was like her first time teaching in the collegiate level and like building that strong relationship, also wearing many hats because I ended up
Mhm.
becoming a program assistant for Dolce Suono Ensemble, which is her ensemble
Yeah.
and seeing behind the scenes stuff that goes on in, making concerts happen. And also she is like one of my very close friends now too, as well as being a mentor and my former teacher. So it's I think that's the special thing about studying music, and especially in the classical space, there is such a strong like culture of mentorship and one-on-one, like getting to know a student and their needs and catering to that.
Oh my goodness, yes. And just seeing your face light up when you said, like, "She's my friend," and I think that's the most precious space to be as a teacher and as a student. If you can respect each other and be in that space, a healthy space where you are both growing and learning from each other, and then you can call yourself friends. Oh my goodness, that is so magical, and just seeing your face light up like that, I hold a special place with all of my teachers within my heart. But the one teacher who I feel very much so akin to that relationship is Dr. Novar Galileas, where I studied with her in Greece. And she is literally like one of my best friends. I love talking with her, I love sharing things with her, but she made me work. I mean, I grew so much during that time. And so, yeah, that's amazing. I'm so happy for you. And yeah, if anybody wants to check it out, it is episode 133. I had a hot second to look it up. But I love to drop as a podcaster. Do you do that? Do you drop in other episode interviews with past guests within the current conversation?
I feel like I'm not as like meticulous with it as you are. Like I'll say, "Oh, like we interviewed this guest," but I never know the episode number. Like it's incredible to me that you're always like pulling the episode number out because like and you have way more episodes than Creative Baggage too. So like props to you. Cuz I'm like, "Yeah, I forget which season we interviewed this person and they said something cool."
Well, I'm just weird like that. There's really no two ways around it. It's just I'm kind of weird about that. But so speaking of podcasting and going into well, let me take a step back. Coming into this conversation, Serena, you don't know how giddy I was getting ready for this conversation and being in this headspace and heart space with you because of the different roles and hats that we have in each other's lives. And there's so many parallels to your life and to my life where I can pick your brain about anything, music making, podcasting, entrepreneurship, thinking creatively and designing new projects within our community for people to thrive. I mean, there are so many layers to this conversation and so many different directions that we can take this. I'm afraid, like, I'm going to respect your time, but in a very good way, I'm afraid that this conversation could easily be 2 hours because we could talk 30 minutes on just entrepreneurship, 30 minutes on just etc. So that's why I'm so giddy because it's like all these full circle moments. But, anyways, I digress. So, the podcasting element, I'm really curious, like, how did you start the podcast? What inspired you to start the podcast? What have you learned along the way? Anything you want to share under that realm?
Sure. So I think, like a lot of other podcasts, Creative Baggage started in the middle of the pandemic. I think it was May of 2020. So the context and background of where I was in life at that point was I was about to graduate or had just graduated from college from my undergrad, and I had a performance degree and not much to do with it. And my best friend Bailey was in a similar boat. I think she had one more year left. And we were used to having these kinds of late night conversations, even way before, like just throughout undergrad. I mean, we became best friends by, staying up late and drinking tea and just talking about, either like complaints, like all the stuff that we didn't like about going to music school or, like I think at that age you have a lot of like really idealistic views too about what you want from music. And so we would just hash those out, like have these really, really deep conversations. Sometimes one of us would end up crying. Like it
Mm.
was I think a really special foundation that our friendship was built on. And so, it all happened and we were kind of accustomed to doing projects together because I mean, we worked together on Dolce phono ensemble, and we were
Mm.
in a lot of the same classes, so we did lots of, like, music theory projects together. We were like, "Well, this is our chance, like, we were stuck at home, like, we should do something."
Mm.
And it was I'll be honest, it was Bailey's idea to start a podcast because I don't know, I hadn't listened to many podcasts before that, wasn't really my thing, and I just didn't know, like, I didn't feel comfortable talking to a microphone, like, I had this
Mm.
really bad, like, microphone voice, like, if you put me on a ca it still happens if you put me on a camera, but now it's better with just audio because I'm trained for it now.
Really?
But I
Huh.
would talk, like, as soon as I knew I was being recorded, I started talking, like, a little robotically, and
Huh.
so, like, the first couple times we tried to record, Bailey would make fun of me for that, and then we kind of I think we scrapped a few episodes here and there that we had recorded, but it really started off as, like, voice memos, us at the kitchen table,
Mm.
just saying whatever and then seeing what stuck, and we would go I think it might have been, like, our first few times really playing with GarageBand too, so we would, like, airdrop it to GarageBand and be like, "Should we cut this? That sounded weird. Let's cut that." And we had these little I think they were teeny tiny, like, maybe, like, 20-minute episodes in the beginning of just us, talking about our baggage. It started off as mostly complaints. And then yeah, and I remember being like, I don't feel comfortable sharing this on social media yet, like, let's just
Mm.
have this project and see what happens, and Bailey, when she gets into something, she really does the research. So like she knew like which podcast platforms to like go for and like we just kind of sent it to a few close friends and set up the basic like structure of the podcast without really thinking anything of it. And it was only when like we got really cool feedback from the people that we knew that were like, "Yeah, that resonates with me." Like I felt this way all throughout music school and, like, nobody has said anything. We all just, like, kinda keep it to ourselves and pretend we're having a great time. Yeah, so then we had the idea to, interview some of our friends and talk to them and also our professors, and that's when we built up the courage to actually, like, talk about it publicly and put it on our social media platforms, and eventually we reached out to guests that we didn't really know that were, either people that we admired from afar or, like, had written a cool article that we were interested in talking about, and that's when it spiraled into becoming, like, I felt like it was a proper thing, like, it
Mm.
wasn't just a side project, like, we were making a regular release schedule, we
Mm.
were really taking it seriously, and yeah, that was kind of how it got started, and we really didn't have expectations, I think we were surprised every step of the way at how well things were going.
That's amazing. Oh my goodness. I love all of it. And I especially love the origins of the show, like tea time with my best friend. That's phenomenal. And I think that is the heart of podcasting. It's two friends talking or two experts talking, and they're dishing out real gold nuggets, like real gems are being conveyed, and you're having epiphanies, the needle's being moved forward in whatever niche, but it's in this very intimate, vulnerable, approachable way. And I think that's the element that podcast listeners love. They love being a fly on the wall, just kind of swarming around and going, "Oh wow, look at that!" Like so and so and so and so, they're talking about X topic, and they geek out because of that.
Mm.
And if you can keep tapping into that, and I totally empathize with you with what you said about radio voice. Now I'm on the air, right? But if you can remember that essence of and the origins of that podcast, myself included, tea time with my best friend, that's what podcasting is. And we don't have to put up this facade or the radio voice or anything like that, because that's what podcasting is. Not to sound redundant, but that's literally what it is. And I think you're not wrong, like myself included, when you talk with these, big names, especially like for me, because I get a little starstruck sometimes, like, oh my goodness, I'm talking with so and so. In the early days of 360, same thing. It was like, oh my goodness, like who am I to talk to X person? And I have to be a certain way. And that's not the case at all. Like it's two humans having a conversation and learning from each other. and then podcast listeners get to eavesdrop and, check it out. So thank you for sharing that. How did you overcome that radio voice? Like, what was it, just doing it on the regular to be like, oh, okay, and I can be open about this and I can just be Serena?
I mean, it helped to just have my best friend there with me because, she like we're so used to having these conversations, and it helped for me, like the simple act of like flipping my phone over when we were recording to not see the voice memos like app going helped
Uh,
me. And then I think once we started getting guests on, it felt easier because it was, and especially the ones that we were meeting for the first time, it was like we were actually just asking questions to get to know them, and there's like an authenticity to that, which is why like we ended up, you know, mostly releasing guest episodes after a while, because I think the like most interesting thing is to kind of get to know these people either that we knew a little bit about or almost nothing at all, or we knew one cool thing that they did but nothing about like their being, and
mhm,
kind of getting down to the nitty-gritty of, what they stand for and their thoughts, and getting to know them within like an hour. So, I guess like a lot of the hesitations went away over time, but it was kind of cool, like, as since I had no idea what I was doing going in, like everything that I learned by doing, which was
mm.
really cool. Like, there was no, like, research on, like, how do you start a podcast or, like, anything theoretical, like, any kind of strategy. Like, it was all very much like, "Okay, we recorded this episode, now we have to figure out how to edit it." And, like, now we have to figure out, like, how we wanna make the titles and write the descriptions, and,
Mhm.
like, the first time we ever reached, or actually our first guest, Connor Frost, reached out to us, and that was super cool because he found our podcast on, like, Spotify or something, and he was like, "I'd love to come on," and we were like, "Oh, we can do that?"
I love it.
So, it was a lot of fun surprises along the way.
That's fantastic. And about the audio editing, that's a great segue into the part two of this conversation, where we get to talk with your friend and colleague and podcasting audio editor, Justin Bartlett. Is that how you pronounce his last name, Bartlett?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we get to talk with him tomorrow and talk about, that teamwork and the efforts that you guys put, out there through Creative Baggage. So I'm looking forward to that conversation.
Oh, yeah. No, it's gonna be great, and I feel like, I mean, Justin came on, I think, season 2, and he just, like, liked the podcast and volunteered to help us make it not sound like we did it on voice memos and GarageBand. But it does keep getting better, like, every season it sounds a little better, which is cool, but sometimes I talk to Justin, I'm like, "Wow, it's so embarrassing, like, all those old episodes people can still listen to," but at the same time, it's kind of cool to see that evolution, and, like, it is authentic because we didn't know any better back then.
Yeah, no, I agree with the latter. It's not embarrassing at all because if anything, I was thinking, before you become and get into like your thousandth episode, hold on to those voice memos because you're going to look back and kind of like, a little tear, get sentimental, like, oh my goodness, listen to those, voice memos from day one. Yeah, it's going to, and I know it means a lot to you. So that's really cool. I kind of, something along those lines, like when I was trying to figure out the name for 360, my husband and I wrote down like 20, 30 names on a piece of paper and pencil, very chicken scratch. And we started crossing off names and circling things and finding variations, etc. And I say this because I kicked myself. I didn't know that I would be into year 5, going into, 225 episodes and wanting that piece of paper. Like, I'm curious to see what I
Mm.
was wanting to call it and just to have that piece of, history to the podcast. Cause like, you throw your blood, sweat, and tears into your show and you really care about it because in some way, in a weird way, it's like your digital baby, and so to have those memories is really precious. So I have a few questions about podcasting only because to me, I have my own perspective from my own unique lens, the benefits of how 360 has helped my career. And I kind
Mm.
of want to pick your brain about it for you and for your career. So now that what year are you in right now for Creative Baggage?
Like 2.5.
Okay. So throughout these 2.5 years, what is like one of the biggest benefits of you being a podcasting musician? If you had to like claim this is the number one benefit, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Or maybe two?
One big one off the top of my head is connecting with really amazing people in the industry, or in general. I think, like, asking someone to come on your podcast because you read a cool article that they wrote or just love them as a performer is a great conversation starter
Mm,
to get to know someone like in a real authentic way. And
mm,
so I think for me, just having guests on the podcast, even though it's like, oh, it's for an episode, really, I think the most amazing part is staying connected with them afterwards because you
mm.
started off on a good foot. Like you really had a deep, honest conversation for the podcast, and there's something about it too. Like when you're asking someone to come on your podcast, it feels a little, I think, easier for me than to just be like, oh, I really like what you do. Can we like have
Yeah,
coffee or like a random call or something. Like
yeah.
for me, asking someone to come on the podcast is a little more like official, a little bit more like I have something to offer you. And then to be able to stay connected with like a broad network of awesome people who are doing great things has been really, really fulfilling for me.
Mm, yeah, I concur 100%. I love it. For me, it's the networking too, but this networking in the sense of not the sleazy way that some people may hear that word. It's from, like what you said, from a very authentic place, getting to know somebody. And you're right. Then you have this platform to offer them rather than like, hey, I think you're cool. And I'm just shooting out this random email. But then there's actually another step to that. I would love to invite you to Blink.
Right. I think it puts you a little bit more on like an even playing ground and in a good way. I remember being a kid and like whenever I want to see like an amazing flutist that I was a big fan of, going up to them after a show, and actually this happened with my teacher me too. Like I would just be so red in the face, so embarrassed and like being like, "Oh my god, I love you. You're so great." But I don't think that that's like, I mean, it's nice. It feels nice to get those compliments from your audience, but I'm sure it feels a little bit awkward too on the other side of
Hmm.
it to have this kind of like one-sided like, "Oh, this person is a fan. Great."
Yeah.
And so, yeah, to have like be hosting a show, offer for them to come on, and then be having like a very like natural conversation, I think is a gift. Cause you can't always escape those dynamics, especially when you're like a really big fan of someone's work.
Hmm. Oh, yeah, I completely agree. I love everything you just said. Yeah, podcasting, it holds no bias, right? I mean, you can have your podcast album art like Amy Porter. She has a flute podcast, right? And then there's Rebecca Fuller and the other podcasting musicians and other flutists out there. And when we each hold our own unique set of skills. But when you go into that podcast Apple store or app or whatever, like there you are, right? You're right up against the big dogs. And yeah, it evens out the playing field for sure. I love that. So, my other question about podcasting and you being a podcasting musician is have you noticed your musicality grow because you are a podcaster? Like how you approach the instrument. Are you approaching the instrument differently because you're a public speaker now? Do you teach differently because of it? Like, how has podcasting helped you grow as a musician, if at all?
Hmm. I definitely think that sometimes like talking on the podcast can be therapeutic. Like, we're dishing out nuggets, like you said, or sometimes even advice. And it's just like teaching, sometimes I'm like telling my students something and I'm like, wait, I should really do that myself. So I feel like sometimes like, just cycling through your ideas, bouncing those ideas off of, especially when you're talking to a performer that you really look up to, there are definitely built-in lessons that you get to learn that definitely apply to music.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I love it. I just get really geeky and excited when I talk to other podcasting musicians just because I wholeheartedly, my 360 listeners are going to be like, oh my gosh, Heidi, you've said this like a gazillion times. I really feel like it's an untapped market for musicians. Claiming a piece of like digital real estate and having that secured and growing that foundation onward and upward with your podcast can do wonders for your career. It
Mhm.
really highlights you as an artist, as a teacher, whatever hat you're wearing. It highlights you and it amplifies your voice so much out into the community for people to find you, to want to work with you, to possibly collaborate with you or partner with you on some project. And I just think the ripple effect is huge. I think it's
Mm.
ginormous. And so that's why I advocate, if there is a musician out there looking for those opportunities, say one of those two doors keep closing in your face, right? Then don't wait for somebody to say like, "Oh, you are hired now to teach." Just go out there and find those teaching opportunities for yourself. And the podcasting world can give you that stage where you can stand on it and then have a floodlight or a stage light shining on you and then a microphone in front of you and you get to be seen and heard. So that's why I geek out about it because of the potential that a show can offer to a modern day musician.
No, I think that's absolutely true. And, a lot of the reasons that our podcast was able to continue through all the big changes that have happened since, 2 years ago, including, having a long distance team because I moved across the world, is that we've gotten really cool opportunities through having this platform. The first big thing that happened, after we became kind of a stable running entity was we got to speak at the University of Maryland and we did like a live recording session with students. So we were opening up the same kind of conversations that we have about creativity with, freshmen, sophomore students who were all doing like a bunch of different things. Like it was super cool to see because I think going through music school, it's like, oh, I just go to music school. Like that's all. But all these students were like, yeah, I major in political science and theater, or like I'm music ed and biology. And so, like, talking to these students, but also, being an official entity that was invited to go do this really cool project, and then, of course, we released the episodes after on Creative Baggage, was kind of the first click in our minds that, like, "Hey, the
Hmm.
podcast in itself is awesome and we love it, but the podcast brings even more opportunities to us that we never would have imagined if we didn't have it."
Exactly. Yep. You took the words right out of my mouth. That's it. Yeah. And great minds think alike. I actually have done something similar where I've gone to campuses and talked with students and done and produced a live podcast series with undergraduate and graduate music students at Texas Women's University, Texas A&M at Commerce. I'm forgetting a few other schools, UTA down in Arlington, Texas. And it was such a neat experience to hear these students and their perspectives and the goals and the creative projects that they have their hands on. I learned a lot. So I absolutely loved doing similar work, just like yourself.
It's also a bouncing point for other projects, like, now we're focused on building a database and we got to go to Budapest to, like, pitch that project, get the funding and all of that, but, like, I had this idea, "Oh, I wanna help musicians by building a database of opportunities," like, all the opportunities that I wished I would have had exactly the moment that I was feeling lost and starting Creative Baggage, but it only, I think, is able to be where it's at now because we had an existing platform of, like, you can go and listen to our episodes and understand what we stand for and why we're building this database instead
Mhm.
of, coming out of nowhere. And so, like, that trust that we've developed with our audience and also, the trust that new audiences can have with us because they can go back and check out what we've already done makes it so that our project has, like, a little bit of built-in legitimacy, which I
Mhm.
really was grateful for when we were trying to get everything off the ground and still am now because, we're continuing to try to grow it.
Hmm. Yeah. Where can people find your database? Because I think it's extraordinary. I absolutely love it. And you're right. You really nailed it right on the head in the sense of I wish that I had a resource like that when I was in college and graduate school too. And even like post DMA, when I look at this database, I'm like, oh my goodness, like if I would have had access to these different opportunities like internships, TAs and jobs and gigs, if I had that opportunity to go to one space, type in what I'm looking for, and then those things, those announcements pop up. Oh my goodness, how phenomenal. So you created, well, let's back up. So where can they find the database?
Sure. So, first of all, I want to thank you for supporting it. Flute 360 is on there as our very first sponsor. But it really means a lot because
Mm.
we want people who believe in that the mission to be supporting us, to be using the database. It's called For the Lost Creative, and it's really easy. You can find it at forthelostcreative.com. But like Heidi said, you can, kind of filter out options. So, unpaid internships, paid internships, jobs, grants, like whatever phase you are in life and what you're looking for, to just be able to scroll through and see what options are out there. I've even heard people say like, I looked at a few job opportunities that weren't the perfect fit, but then it sent me down the right path of what kinds of opportunities I was interested in to look further. And so it's just like being able to see your options. I
Hmm.
feel like for me, any kind of creativity happens when the pieces are in front of me. Like I love visual art as well. And just having, like, my supplies in front of me, this and the colors that I might wanna use, or, like, I like upcycling and some creative reuse, so, like, having the, like, garbage that I wanna turn into something else just sitting in front of me and I can look at it, like, it gets my mind flowing versus, sitting there in a blank room saying, like, "Hey, I wanna do a creative project," or, like same thing with practicing, just having your music out in front of you reminds you to be thinking about it. And so
Hmm.
I think it's the same thing with career stuff. Like, if you just don't know what your options are, then you're just gonna feel stuck and you're not gonna know where to start or what to Google or who to ask. But if you
Hmm.
get just a few ideas that resonate, then it's a lot easier. And you never know, like, how things will open up for you if you just try a few things.
Girlfriend, literally goosebumps over here. I kid you not. I'm not over exaggerating. And I I just fall in love with you more and more every time we talk. And I really mean that, Serena, because the way you think, the way you articulate things, it's phenomenal. And so I'm just extending out an invitation like, think about this, put a pin in it because you have such a creative mind. Think of ways that we can continue to collaborate even past UMBS 2023 because I would love for you to be a guest teacher in my studio. I would love for you to be a guest teacher in one of my remote classes. So the wheels in my head are turning. So I'm going to put that out there and see what happens, but I need you to know that because I feel like once I get that out of my mouth, out into the world, then there's momentum there. So there we go.
Yeah, I would love to
Yeah.
continue to collaborate. I mean, it's been amazing so far. We've only known each other for 6 months. It feels like we've known each other for way longer.
Yeah, and all the things, right? We have like the Ultimate Music Business Summit, your database, and yes, I'm a sponsor. And with that, I will say, count me in as a forever sponsor year to year to year because what you and the team are doing is extraordinary. And you've heard me say this before. I wish there were more Serenas in the world in their own very unique way because you're making an impact and you're really changing the lives. And I know you are because I don't think she will mind, but a friend and now a mutual friend of ours, Carmen, whom you're starting to get to know, she's been using the database and she has noticed opportunities for herself and her flute career. And just hearing her then on the sidelines over here, right, going, oh my goodness, I found this database. And she had no idea of our affiliation with each other. She had no idea at
Mm.
all. She's like, I found this database and like, can you what's the name? Like, because I'm kind of curious because I'm pretty sure I know the founder. And come to find out, she was talking about you and your project. And it's to me, and you've probably heard me say this through 360. Another thing I geek out about is these full circle moments Hence
Right.
360. It's all connected. It's all connected. People, ideas, projects, all of that. And if we can impact one person's life through the podcast or one person's life through the database, like I know we're impacting more people and you're impacting more people than just one person, but it's it's so fulfilling, right? And that's
Right.
that's one of my missions in life is to make somebody else's life that much better. And I know you lead with that heart of servitude in everything you do. So I thank you for that.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I mean, it means a lot to hear you say it. And I think, like, we do thrive off of these yeses that we get from people as well. Like, we
Hmm,
wanna be independent and self-confident and, you know, it's important to work on that coming from yourself as much as you can, but I can't say that, a person can thrive and have an amazing career without getting that validation at various points, and I think, you know,
hmm,
having a mentor say, like, "I love what you do," having an audience member come up to you after a show, or just, like, getting accepted into a program that you applied for, any kind of, like, moment that is a turning point. I mean,
hmm,
for anybody that I've spoken with on my podcast too about their musical journey, there's always some kind of turning point of, like, I realized that I could keep doing this because X happened, because this person told me that they believed in me,
hmm,
because I was accepted to this program that I thought I had no chance of getting into, because I won an award for something that I did.
hmm,
And so I think it, again, coming full circle, is like when you start a podcast or when you do a project or when you meet a lot of different people, you're increasing your odds of getting those moments, like
hmm,
one of the moments that I felt really confident in myself as an entrepreneur, and like continued confidence in the podcast, especially because we were going through a rough time with some transitions in our team, was winning an award at Budapest to build the database in the first place, because it was a team of jury members who were in the business, who cared about music business, that said, like, "Yeah, your project is worth funding." And, like, if you keep going back in my history, the same thing with Flute, right? Like, I had moments where teachers were like, "Yeah, you're worth taking on in my studio," or like, "Yeah, I believe in you. You should apply
hmm.
for this program, or you should apply for this competition." And so just having those moments is so, so meaningful, and the more opportunities you try for, or the more projects that you build for yourself, the more people that you talk to, the more likely you'll fill your life with those moments that give you momentum, like you
Hmm.
said.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. It's like another feather in your cap. You're like, oh, yeah. Yeah. I love that.
Momentum,
Mo
momentum.
moment. I love that. So going back to Budapest, what was that funding process like? Tell me a little bit about it. Was it a grant? Was it fill me in?
Sure. It was probably one of the most unexpected things to happen, and I like to tell this story because all the factors of getting there and then winning were highly specific scenarios. Like, we had to have started this podcast. I had to
Mm,
have moved to Paris to go study at this school because I was introduced to the program. It's called Encore Accelerando, by a friend of mine in my studio, because she worked for the organization. She knew about it. She was like, "Hey, you have a cool project. Why don't you apply?" And then so we had no idea what exactly it was, but I had this database idea, so I was like, "All right, I'm gonna put this down on paper. We're gonna send it off and see what happens." And then we got an email saying we were invited on, like, a fully funded trip to Budapest for a week of
hmm.
workshops. So in my mind, we had already won. Like, we get to go to
Wow.
Budapest for the first time, and for a week we had, presenters and workshops and people helping us develop our idea. And it was really just
Wow.
the last day was like a conference. It was the Back to the Future conference, where everybody, got a chance to apply what they learned and pitch their project to a panel of jury members. So, like, for the whole week, honestly, we were just focused on learning and getting ideas and getting, you know feedback from our peers and from our coaches on how to make this project really work out. And winning that pitch was really just like an extra ribbon, like it was the
Hmm.
day of that I started getting nervous. Like I thought nothing about the final day the whole time because we were just having fun, making friends, learning. And then the day of, I was like, oh my gosh, Justin, I'm kind of nervous for this. Like, I kind of want to win. And he was like, don't worry, I think we'll be fine. And then, so we gave a great presentation, and everybody's project there was super amazing. So, I was sitting
Hmm.
there on my toes, and they did the whole shebang. There was an awards ceremony. We had to wait for it. And it was just like surreal, but it was an amazing experience. We've kept in touch with a lot of the people that were there. And basically, what happened was they awarded grants to three of the finalists who gave, I guess they judged based on the project, but also the presentation and
Hmm.
how impactful the presentation itself was, how doable the project is, and like how fleshed out the idea is, all of that coming together. And so we won a grant to get started. And that was how we were able to spend all summer building it, marketing it, and improving upon it.
Kudos. That's amazing. And I love your perspective. You saying just winning the grant was the cherry on top, but you had already won because you were accepted to attend the workshops and to learn from these phenomenal people. So, what great insight because yeah, I mean, whether or not you didn't know if you were going to win or not, right? But just having that experience to learn and to grow and to be surrounded by like-minded people, that to you was winning. And so, yeah, phenomenal. That's great.
Right. No, the idea itself, I mean, I remember going in having no idea what everybody else's projects were gonna be like. I was like,
Ooh,
I don't even know how valid my idea was. I was like, oh, it's just a database. Like anybody can build a database. And so it really was like going through that week that made me realize, like, one, it's not just a database; it's a lot of work. And
yeah.
two, like this is something that seriously resonated with people and people really need. And obviously, I did know that inside because I wanted to create it because I knew I would have wanted something like that, and I knew that
Yeah.
it was already, helpful for our immediate community. But like kind of seeing the bigger picture of like how much of an impact it could make if we did this well and distributed it well and communicated why we were building it well made me realize like I should, really take this to heart and do
Hmm.
everything I can to make it happen because as much as I want to like be humble and say like, oh, it's just a little project that I'm doing, like I
Oh.
realized how much it mattered to me and how much it could matter to everyone else who uses it.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. So as because you talked about this idea of, oh, it's just a database. Anyone can build a database. Very, I love it. Not everybody can build a database, and there are, I'm sure, 1,000 steps from start to finish, and I'm sure you're still learning in the process while you're knee deep in it. But what was one of the biggest lessons that the database taught you, like while you were building it, and or a lesson, perhaps as you were going through the process, maybe a hurdle, and how did you overcome it? Just kind of talk to me about that because, I mean, you're a classically trained musician, right? Do you have any background in like formal studies with tech or websites or anything like that?
Well, yeah, that's that's what I spent all summer doing. But you're right. I remember thinking like if you told me in high school that I would be building databases right now, I'd be like, "What? I have
Yeah.
no interest in this." And it's true. I think in any other context, I would be bored to death. If someone was just like teaching me the concept of databases and how they work in general, I would be like, "Why are you telling me all of this?" But it was because it was for that purpose that I was, like,
Mm,
really, interested and willing to learn all the best ways to make it happen, and so I have a little bit of background in web design, not in the coding sense, but I've always been interested in websites, and so
huh.
since I was a kid, I would play around with different web building platforms and, the click and drag version, but I really, really like doing that, and I remember being a kid having a great time doing that, and so like I've done most of the work on the creative baggage website leading up to the database. And then we had the database originally set up in Notion just for practical purposes. So we would like share the link with our friends and people who wanted to look at opportunities, regularly update the opportunities, but it wasn't like official. It was only after we won that grant that we were like, okay, now it's time to like move it onto our website. But
Mm.
how are we going to do that? Because, you know, you have to be able to code to have it be able to have search and filter and tags and everything that we wanted to make it easy to use. And so we actually ended up working with my little brother, who is now a sophomore in college, studying computer science. And I had no idea what he could do and what he couldn't do. You know, I was just it's like, oh yeah, you know, like he's my little brother. Like maybe he can help us. Like we'll
That's
watch some
cute.
videos. But it ended up being like a really great experience because, you know, we haven't had that much in common growing up. Like he played violin for quite a while, but he was never super interested in music the way that I was. And like we just didn't have a lot to go off of. Like we always watched the same shows like from our childhood together when it's the holidays and we play the same few games. But like beyond that, there's not too much for discussion. So it was really nice to just meet on Zoom like once a week and like problem solve together. Cause, you know, sometimes I would just like click and drag the elements that I want in the places that I wanted. And he would intuitively know how I wanted it to function based on where the buttons were and how it looked. And so it was really cool to, you know, give him a task and then kind of give him full reign on how he wanted to get it done and solve this problem. And I, you know, there was
Wow.
no other way because I didn't have any like ability to micromanage because I didn't have any skills in the coding arena.
No,
But that was
that's
super cool.
fantastic. Oh, cool. I love that. And it's so what I hear in this is, isn't it interesting how life, you know, gives you these opportunities and look where you're at now. And, you know, in hindsight, you know, looking back and realizing, oh, I like to do the drag and drop features and websites. And I have this brother. And then all of these little pieces come together. And then you, at the end of it, you know, you're just like, oh, wow, look how it's all adding up. Because we all
Yeah.
have a unique path, right? And so, like, the background of your experience with websites at a very young age, and then your brother, and then other factors, I'm sure it just kind of accumulates, right? And then you have this thing on the other side of it. And I don't know, it's just kind of a moment of being in awe of the wonderment of how it all comes together and forms this beautiful tapestry.
No, it was a really like I mean, I was definitely a little stressed at the time, but now looking back, it was a really like fun and exciting experience because I remember just like waking up every day and wanting to go straight to my laptop and just like get started on all the different pieces, and then it would be dark, and I'd be like, "Oh man, I guess it's time to go to sleep now." But there's something really cool about really figuring this all out from scratch, which is also like, you know, the joy of getting started with the podcast for me, at least, because I didn't have a lot of background, was like I kind of got to figure out how to do things my way. And it's nice to be able to, you know, have like a strong background and knowledge. And on Flute, I definitely have that, right, of how things
Mhm.
are supposed to be. But I think sometimes there's more room for creativity if you don't know how it's supposed to be done, because you might find like another interesting way to do it. And that I felt like was one of the most fulfilling experiences of working on this project, was like
Hmm.
there were so many pieces of it that I had no prior knowledge of.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And thank you so much for listening to this episode. Now, remember, this is part 1 of a 2-part series. So in order for you to gain the second part of Serena's conversation, you definitely want to subscribe to the Flute 360 podcast through your favorite podcast app. This way, you won't miss out on the rest of the conversation, and you won't miss out on weekly episodes that go out every Tuesday. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye. let's talk about Flute.